What are the government policies were maintained even when the government changes?
Most of the political parties, and indeed most Australians, share a relatively similar view of our future. So a lot of the political debate in Australia, which is very lively, is not so much about the general direction of policy, but rather the question of the pace and the extent of the changes in those policies. So it's about the detail and the emphasis in policy rather than the general direction. So, for example, in the case of economic policy, there is broad acceptance of the need for Australia to be an open, internationally competitive economy. For this reason, microeconomic reform is terribly important. All of the major parties emphasise the importance of a continuing process of microeconomic and structural reform to improve Australia's competitiveness, at the same time maintaining sound macroeconomic policies to maintain balance. And the value of that has been illustrated. For example, Australia was the only advanced country to go through the global financial crisis without going into a recession. Our economy is already growing strongly again, most recently at a rate of about 3%. Even though Australia has a very low government debt, both parties agree on the need to reduce that and to bring the budget back into surplus after the process of stimulation during the economy. So there's, again, broad agreement in that area. Moving to another area, foreign policy. Clearly, Australia sees itself as an activist middle power with strong multilateral interests, but at the same time that we see the United States as a key ally in the region, we place a lot of weight on strengthening the architecture and the quality of our relations with our immediate neighbours, in the context, though, of a global policy. And in that area, I'm very pleased to say that as part of the rebalancing of that policy, we are placing a lot more weight and emphasis on our relations with South America in recent years. Again, broad agreement on those directions. Turning to another area, social policy. There is a broad agreement on the need for an efficient social security net which protects people who are in need and supports them, while at the same time providing incentives and assistance for people to move back into gainful employment as early as they are able to do so. And that process, I must say, is also important in terms of promoting structural change in the economy, because if people move out of employment, there are mechanisms in place to retrain and to encourage them to go back into the workforce. And I suppose that's reflected in the very low unemployment rate we have of 5.1%, which for most countries is a very positive outcome. You could look in a number of other areas of policy and you would find, I think, the same broad agreement on direction, but in the context of a lively political debate on the means of implementation and some of the emphasis in those policies.
How is the current relationship between the press and the government?
In Australia, the press is recognised as a very important institution to promote an open and lively debate on government policy and the direction of our economy. So the relationship in a democratic country like Australia is one of openness. There are very few restrictions placed by the government on the press, other than light restrictions in terms of the levels of foreign ownership and appropriate content. And access by the press to information is facilitated by the strong freedom of information laws we have in Australia, which enables the press to have access to government information.
What's your country's position with respect to nuclear energy?
We have no nuclear energy in our overall energy mix because we have enormous resources of fossil fuels, carbon in particular, and most of our primary energy comes from that. At the same time, we're one of the world's major exporters of uranium in the context of a strong safeguards policy to ensure that it is used for peaceful purposes. We have one nuclear reactor which is used for research purposes and for the production of medical radioactive isotopes, and that in fact was supplied by Argentina and is a world-class reactor.